They say betrayal hurts most when it comes from the one person who was supposed to protect you. But what no one prepares you for is when that betrayal isn't just personal, it's strategic. That was my reality. I wasn't just cheated on, I was being framed. And it all started with a voicemail I was never supposed to hear. One night, my phone lit up with a voicemail from my wife. Strange, she hadn't called me. I figured it was accidental. But when I pressed play, everything changed. There was no greeting, no message, just muffled voices and moaning. Her voice and someone else's. I listened to it twice, then again. My brain tried to protect me, coming up with every excuse possible. But deep down, I knew what I was hearing. It was her. An hour later, she walked through the door, smiling, kissed me on the head, asked if I wanted anything from the fridge, then casually made her way upstairs like she hadn't just detonated a bomb. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, because I was planning. We'd been married for 6 years. We had a life, a routine, inside jokes, shared memories. None of which meant anything now, so I did the only thing that made sense. I watched her late night meetings, the sudden return of perfume and red lipstick. No calendar entries, no names, just stories that didn't add up. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I cloned her phone. She never suspected a thing. I mirrored her texts and photos to a hidden folder, and what I found confirmed everything I was afraid of. There were messages, dozens, photos, room numbers, wine glasses, inside jokes I didn't understand. One thread in particular stood out, saved under a woman's name, but it wasn't a woman. It was a man. And in between the heart emojis and can't wait to see you texts, there it was. He's so clueless, I think I could make him think he cheated. That sentence rewired my brain. This wasn't just about betrayal. She was setting me up. One morning, she left her laptop open. I saw an email draft that froze me where I stood. Subject line, documenting emotional instability, legal support. It was a character assassination in progress, describing me as manipulative, aggressive, a risk. None of it was true. But it sounded convincing. That's when I realized she wasn't just leaving me. She wanted to destroy me on the way out. That same night, I created a new email account, one she'd never find, and I started documenting everything. Dates, times, screenshots, audio clips. I even began recording her late night phone calls from the hallway, whispers I wasn't meant to hear. She thought I was blind. She didn't know I was building a case. I invited her to dinner at her favorite place. She smiled and said yes, wore a dress she hadn't worn in over a year. She talked the whole night, about work, about herself. I just listened, because now I knew she wasn't just cheating, she was rehearsing. If I can get him to snap, I can say I was scared. She wasn't looking for an argument, she was hoping for one. By the end of that week, I'd hired a private investigator, not to catch her cheating. I already had that. I needed to know what else she was doing behind the scenes. Bank accounts, lawyer meetings, quiet moves I couldn't see, because if she was going to build a false narrative, I was going to burn it down before she finished the last sentence. This isn't a story about a man who got cheated on. This is about a man who saw the fire and learned how to carry water before it consumed everything. She started acting sweet again, almost overnight, smiling more, touching my arm when she walked by, wearing that perfume I used to compliment her on years ago. For a second, someone else might have thought she was falling back in love with me, but I knew better. It wasn't affection, it was performance. She wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to shape the story. So when everything blew up, no one would think she was the one who started the fire. I let her play the role, because I was writing my own version of events. A few days after I cloned her phone, the private investigator sent over his first report. Hotel records, surveillance stills, a man I didn't recognize leaning into her car, her in his arms in a parking lot at 1:12 a.m. But it went deeper than that. She had opened a second bank account, one that didn't include my name. She'd withdrawn nearly $18,000 from our joint savings in small chunks. She'd also opened a new P.O. box 2 towns over, set up mail forwarding for some of her business documents, quietly moving pieces into place like I was too dumb to notice. What I realized sitting there with my laptop glowing in a dark living room was that this wasn't an affair anymore. It was an extraction. She wasn't planning to leave me. She was planning to erase me. And when she did, she wanted the world to believe it was my fault. She wanted me to be angry, to snap, to give her that moment of rage she could call evidence. So I gave her nothing. Instead, I gathered everything. I copied every photo, every location ping, every call log. I recorded timestamps, labeled text threads. I built a file so airtight it could double as a police report. Then I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer. One I found through someone I trusted, someone who understood discretion. I sat across from him in a small office with no signage and told him everything. The voicemail, the text, the hotel, the email draft she was writing about me. He sat quietly through all of it. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Edith, she's not just preparing to leave you, she's trying to walk out clean while burying you on the way." I asked what I should do. He told me to wait. He said she was building a case, and if I moved too soon, I'd lose the element of surprise. He told me to collect more. Then he said something that stuck with me. Control wins, and right now, she thinks she has it. That night, I told her she looked beautiful. She smiled like she believed me, and then she asked if I wanted to go away for the weekend. Just the two of us. Cabin in the woods, no cell signal, bottle of red wine. I said yes. When she went to the shower, I forwarded the reservation email to my lawyer with a note. If I don't check in by Monday, start asking questions. It felt dramatic, but at this point, everything she did felt like it came with an agenda. When we arrived at the cabin, she was full of laughter. She unpacked cheese and crackers like we were celebrating something. She made a fire. She poured the wine. We sat on the couch under a blanket, and for the first time in months, she looked at me like she used to. But I didn't believe it, because I knew what she'd been saying behind my back, what she'd been writing down, what she'd planned to do. She talked about moving to a new city, starting over. She said we could downsize, simplify, go back to basics. I listened, and I kept thinking, what version of this conversation is she going to repeat later? What parts will she edit? What phrases is she collecting so she can twist them later? That night, she fell asleep beside me. The fire burned low. I stayed awake. Not because I thought she'd hurt me, but because I knew somewhere in her mind she was already gone, and whatever she was planning, I was running out of time to stay one step ahead of it. The cabin weekend changed something, not in her, but in me. I stopped playing defense. I stopped reacting, because for weeks she'd been writing the script, and now I was flipping the ending. She came back from the trip with a glow. Soft smiles, gentle questions. But want anything from the store? Should we start planning something for our anniversary? Like nothing ever happened, but I saw right through it. This wasn't affection. It was PR. She was preparing for her next act, one where I looked like the cold, distant husband, and she was just a wife trying to make it work. So I started leaving signs, a receipt, barely visible on the counter, a lunch with someone she didn't know, a name she'd never seen, a real address. She didn't ask about it, but that night, when she thought I'd gone to bed, she checked the trash. I watched her from the hallway mirror. She hesitated, fingered the edge of the paper. She was trying to decide if she'd just found a clue or a threat. Either way, I had her attention now. The next day, she brought me coffee, asked me how work was going, sat close. That was new. I answered with the most believable lie I've ever told. Everything's good. That week, I started moving money. Not everything. Just enough to create a pattern. I opened a new account in a name she didn't recognize. Rewrote one paycheck, canceled a shared subscription. Small things. Easy to miss. But not if you're looking for betrayal. And I wanted her looking. I created a fake contact on my phone. Labeled it with a letter. You see, I planted fake text messages. Carefully written. Suggestive enough to imply something was happening, but not enough to confirm anything. I even recorded blank voice memos with vague, flirty titles, just in case she found them. Because if she thought I was hiding something, she'd start slipping. And she did. She began staying home more. Cooked dinner twice in a week. Asked what I wanted to watch on TV. She thought I was cheating, and it was eating her alive. The lawyer told me, don't move until you're ready to win. So I waited. Kept collecting screenshots, time logs, everything she touched or said. I even turned on a voice recorder before bed, just in case she said something in her sleep. It never caught anything, but it made me feel like I was finally back in control. Then it happened. She asked me a question over dinner that she already thought she knew the answer to. How long has it been going on? I played dumb. With who? She raised an eyebrow. You know. I didn't flinch. I just said, I don't. She laughed, short, cold. Of course you don't. She stood up, cleared her plate, and left the room, and I smiled into my glass of water, because it was working. She was unraveling. 2 days later, she vanished. Came home from work, and the guest room was stripped clean. No note, no text, just a manila folder sitting on the kitchen table. Inside, a printed email thread between her and her lawyer. She'd filed for divorce, cited emotional abandonment, and suspected infidelity. Attached screenshots, the ones I created. That was her fatal mistake, because I had the originals, time-stamped, labeled, backed up. My lawyer submitted a full rebuttal the next morning, included the private investigator's report, photos, call logs, travel records, a complete indisputable timeline showing her infidelity, her financial misdirection, her lies. He included metadata from the fake text. He even submitted a signed affidavit verifying the manipulation. We didn't just neutralize her claims, we made her look calculated, deliberate, dangerous, and I stayed silent. Didn't text, didn't call, didn't post, because now she was the one guessing. When she finally reached out, she tried the same script I'd already read. We should talk. I didn't want this to get ugly. I didn't reply, because she only wanted peace when she realized she was losing. She didn't want to talk when she was winning. She didn't want to talk when she was planning. Now that the narrative wasn't hers anymore, suddenly she wanted a truce. But I wasn't here for truces. I was here for truth, and I already had it. I never replied to her message, not that day, not the one after. And when she finally stopped trying, that's when I knew I had taken back the power. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted control, and when she couldn't get it, she vanished into the silence she used to weaponize. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, like the storm had passed, and I was standing in the wreckage. But I was still standing. The first court appearance came fast. She walked in with her chin high and her expression calm. Pressed blouse, neutral makeup, binder in hand. She looked ready, like she'd practiced. She was prepared to tell them I was cold, distant, manipulative, but none of her preparation mattered, because the evidence didn't lie. We brought the folder. The investigator's photos, the timestamp screenshots, her messages to a man she swore didn't exist, receipts, timestamps, side-by-sides of her story versus the reality. Everything she'd fabricated, twisted, edited, we reversed it, point by point. And her lawyer? He tried to pivot, claimed emotional confusion, said she'd acted out of fear, that she was trying to protect herself from imagined threats. But the emails she wrote didn't look scared, they looked calculated. So did the bank account she opened without my knowledge. So did the calendar she falsified. So did every silent hour she spent pretending nothing was wrong, while quietly preparing to gut me. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just faded, like the air left the room around her. And when it was over, we settled. She got almost nothing, no spousal support, no piece of the money I moved before she could touch it, no part of the story. Because now the narrative didn't belong to her. It never did. A week after it was finalized, she messaged me again. I don't recognize who you've become. I read it and I laughed, because she was right. She didn't recognize me. She'd never taken the time to. And when she finally tried to figure me out, it was too late. I moved into a smaller place, quiet, clean. No memories on the walls, just space and silence. The kind that didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt earned. People who knew us started reaching out, mutual friends, old connections. Everyone had a version of what they'd heard. But the truth, the real story, I never told it to anyone, because I didn't need to. I didn't want her to be the most interesting thing about me anymore. But I did keep one thing. The folder, backed up and buried, not for revenge, for clarity. A reminder that even when someone tries to rewrite your life, you get the final say in how the chapter ends. After everything she did, the setup, the lies, the court, I thought I'd walked away clean. She lost. I kept my name, my money, my silence. And for a while, silence was enough, until it wasn't. Because a few weeks after everything was finalized, small cracks started forming, the kind you almost miss unless you're looking. It started with a text from a friend, someone I hadn't seen in months. It's, you really moving to Austin? I blinked. I hadn't told anyone I was thinking about moving, because I wasn't. She told me you already found a place. He didn't say who. He didn't have to. Then came the email. A leasing agent from a place I'd only browsed once in private mode. Never submitted a form, never signed in. But they emailed me, just confirming interest. Your wife said you were looking. I didn't have a wife anymore. And I never contacted them. That one hit harder, because it wasn't a guess. It was access. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, but then came the voicemail. A guy I hadn't talked to in almost a year. Old coworker, not a friend. His voice was clipped. Hey man, I don't know why you're dragging my name into your divorce crap, but don't. I never mentioned him. Not to her, not to anyone. But somehow she knew about him, and he knew about her. And I hadn't connected those dots since we split. That night, I sat down with my laptop, opened a blank file, started listing names, people who stayed close after the divorce. Not many, just the ones who checked in, called, texted now and then. 5 names, each of them someone I'd trusted, each of them close enough to hear things I wasn't sharing publicly. Nothing stood out. No obvious link, so I set a trap. The next day, I called one of them, said I was planning to move to Chicago. Talked it up, made it sound real, gave a fake real estate agent's name, a street I made up, a price range. He asked questions, sounded interested. That was all I needed. 2 days later, I got a DM from a brand new account. No followers, no posts. Just one message. Running from the truth won't save you, even in Chicago. That was it. Now I had proof. Not just that she was still watching, but that someone was feeding her. Someone I let close. Someone I still texted. Someone who sat across from me, smiled, and asked how I was doing. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anger, from calculation. Because this time, I wasn't going to wait until the walls started closing in. I was going to burn the whole maze down. Finding out she was still watching me? That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was realizing she wasn't doing it alone. Someone was feeding her my life, piece by piece, detail by detail. And I never saw it coming. After the Chicago test, I stopped speaking freely. Every phone call, every message, every casual coffee invite, it all became suspect. I kept replaying conversations in my head. What did I say? Who did I say it to? There were only 5 people close enough to know anything, and suddenly, all 5 felt like suspects. Then one of them reached out twice in the same week. We weren't that close. Not really. He said he was just in the area. Wanted to grab lunch. I said sure. We met at a diner I picked, and I gave him bait. Told him I was seeing someone new, made up the name, said she worked downtown, said we met in a cafe. He asked her name. I gave him one. He smiled, didn't write it down, didn't need to. He wasn't catching up. He was collecting. 2 days later, the anonymous account messaged me again. Does your new girl know who you really are? Heart emoji. Game over. That was the detail, the one I fed only to him. And now I knew he was the leak. He'd been in my house, slept on my couch once, helped me carry boxes out after the divorce, texted me after the court hearing to say, proud of you, man. That one stung, because this wasn't betrayal from someone I hated. This was betrayal from someone I trusted. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't call him out. I set one more trap, told him I was selling something I kept after the split. An old ring box. Said it was locked in a storage unit on 9th Street. There is no 9th Street unit. I made it up. 3 days later, I got a text. Blocked number. Hope the storage unit's insured. Would be a shame if memories got lost. There it was. Not just confirmation, intent. I called my lawyer, told him I had a new layer to the story. He asked how I wanted to handle it, quiet or visible. I told him the same thing I've been saying since all this began. I don't want revenge. I want silence. The kind that makes people wonder where they stand with you. The kind that never answers the question. The next time he called, I picked up. Talked like nothing had changed. Said I was heading out of town, unplugging, going off grid for a bit. He said, that sounds amazing. You deserve it. I said, thanks, man. Hung up and deleted his number. Not blocked, not reported, just erased. Because I wasn't trying to send a message. I was done writing letters to people who only read them to copy the ink. I used to think closure meant confrontation, that if someone lied to you, betrayed you, hurt you, you had to face them, call them out, and make them see what they did. But that's not closure. That's performance. Real closure is when you stop giving them anything to react to, when you disappear from their stage and let them act alone. After I cut him off, things went quiet. The anonymous messages stopped. The fake accounts went dark. The silence came back, but this time it wasn't hollow. It felt clean, still, like I was finally out of the maze. I didn't celebrate, didn't relax. I moved quieter. Locked down accounts, changed passwords, rerouted mail, set up alerts on everything I used to think was secure. Trust doesn't grow back overnight, especially after you've been sleeping next to a saboteur. Then one of the others messaged me. Hadn't spoken in weeks. Said they wanted to check in. Said they missed our conversations. I kept it short. Hope you're doing well too. That should have been the end. But they circled back, brought up the past, not directly, just enough. They said maybe my ex wasn't as manipulative as I thought, that maybe she was reacting to something. Maybe I handled things a little colder than I realized. And I didn't respond to the bait. I smiled to myself and I lied. Told them I'd forgiven her. Said I moved on, that I hoped she was happy. They replied, that's good to hear, and disappeared again. 2 hours later, the old burner account posted for the first time in weeks. One line. Funny how quickly people forget the things they used to be afraid of. That was the message, not to the world, to me. She still had someone inside, but that was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't about her anymore. This wasn't one betrayal. This was a system, a quiet one, built on false comfort and borrowed trust. Someone gave her access. Another gave her stories. One handed her details, and she used all of it like ammunition, and none of them thought I'd ever stop dodging. But I wasn't dodging anymore. I was aiming. I reached out to someone I hadn't talked to in over a year. Old friend. Uninvolved. Someone outside the circle. Told him I needed help securing some things. He said, well, always. That night, we built something private, encrypted, silent, a space to store everything. Every message, every photo, every name, every move I'd tracked. It wasn't revenge, it was insurance. A quiet button I'd never press, unless I had to. Then I pulled the plug, deleted the number I used, wiped my socials, scrubbed every login, left no trail, and I watched what happened next. They looked, they reached out, but I wasn't there anymore, until she messaged me. The ex, out of nowhere. Said she heard I was doing well, said she was glad, then asked, maybe coffee sometime, just to clear the air? I read it once, twice, 3 times. I didn't reply. Didn't delete it, just let it sit, because sometimes ghosts don't haunt you with noise. They haunt you with the chance to open the door again. And I wasn't opening anything. I never replied to her message, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I finally understood something I wish I'd known earlier. Not everyone deserves closure. Some people want a response, not resolution. They don't want peace. They want access. And I'd spent enough time giving people doors they never planned to walk through. So I let it sit there, unread, unanswered, just one last echo of a voice I stopped listening to. The weeks after that were still. No anonymous messages, no odd check-ins. The air felt different, not lighter, not yet, but stable, like I'd finally stepped outside the blast radius. I moved into a new place. It wasn't big, it wasn't flashy, but it was quiet. No photos, no shared furniture, no history. Just space that belonged entirely to me. I stopped flinching when the phone rang. Stopped reading between the lines of every conversation, because no one had lines left to feed me. I'd outlived the script. One morning I got a message from one of the 5, the quiet one, said they felt terrible. That they didn't realize how far she'd taken things, that she manipulated them, used them, twisted what they said, and made it part of her story. I didn't reply, because the apology wasn't for me. It was for their own guilt, for the part they played, for the silence that followed. That's the thing about betrayal no one tells you. It rarely ends with the person who pulled the trigger. There are always people holding the ammo, people who stood by, nodded, smiled, listened, and said nothing. They always come back eventually. Once it's safe, once it's over. Once the version of you they knew is gone and they want to meet the new one. But by then, you're already too far ahead to turn around. I started eating better, sleeping better, not because I healed, not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I stopped pretending I needed to carry every piece of what broke me. And then one night, without thinking, I did something final. I deleted the folder, the evidence, the backups, the plan B, all of it, because I realized I didn't need a defense anymore. No one was coming for me. No one was watching. No one was writing the story, because the story was over. My final move wasn't revenge. It wasn't a twist. It was the part where I stopped caring if they remembered me at all. Because true peace isn't proving your point. It's realizing you don't need to. It's knowing the people who tried to rewrite your ending didn't get the last word. You did, by walking away, and not one of them followed. Not one of them reached out again. Not one of them asked if I was okay because they already knew. They just hoped I'd forget what they did before I remembered who I was. And I did, eventually. I remembered who I was. Not because they let me, but because they couldn't stop me.